I'm Casey with Casey's Paint Shop. I am here at the World's Fair with SATA and BASF. We're going to go over with you guys the correct procedures to go into the paint booth. So everybody thinks it's just jump in and pull the trigger and you're done. It's all about the prep. It really is. You hear people say painting's the easy part, and as far as doing things correctly, it really is. It's the lead up, making sure your color matches, the prep's done right, everything's wiped down, tacked off, right paint suit, clean, right gun. It all comes into play to get a nice, really good finish on what you're doing. So we're here today with these gentlemen to make sure that we kind of explain that to you and hopefully give you enough knowledge so you can move forward and do the same thing.
You gonna start?
Yes.
All right, cool. So what we're doing is we have this raw bumper cover from Toyota, and the idea with what we have happening here is since it's raw, dealing with raw plastic, the preparation is a lot more intense. So earlier an RM product called 902 is a raw plastic cleaner. So we wiped it really, really well with 902. Followed by that, we took 855, which is the RM Shark Bite. It's a combination of basically a cutting material as well as a gray Scotch Brite. So you damp that up really well, you scuff it real thoroughly, wash it with soap and water, and then we do 902 again. So whenever they produce these parts, these plastic parts, there is mold release agents and there's things that happen to them that we have to get off if we want to make sure that we have a really good warrantable paint job that we're going to do on this thing. So after we do the 902, we get all the mold release agent off of it. We do the scuffing, we 902 again. We want to make sure that we wash it. So our process is 902, spray it really well, wipe it till you don't feel any more resistance. You want to make sure that that panel is super clean. Shark Bite with water. After that, we're going to take really fresh water with soap in it and mitt, rinse it really well, let it dry, 902 again. Let that dry for about 20 minutes because it will absorb some of that 902 material. After that, we're going to put it in the booth, and you can actually see Casey right now, he actually has a pump sprayer, and in this is a product called RM910. It used to be 909. It's a water-based cleaner. So what he'll do is he'll spray this on pretty liberally, and he uses this at his shop now for all his restorations, and there's several cleaners that RM has. Specifically when you're dealing with plastic, you don't want to use something with an incorrect flash point because if you create static, you actually can have a fire. When you were with your paint company, tell us about kind of some of that stuff because it's a big deal. It's a safety issue.
Oh, it absolutely is. And in fact, I was a victim of it where I was wiping off some fiberglass with the wrong wax and grease remover, and the flash point was, it arced when I came down and hit the panel, and all of a sudden I smelled hair burning, right? And it was all the hair off my arm was gone because the whole panel flashed. And it was just not using the right product for the substrate that I was trying to wipe down.
Yeah, it's a real thing, and that's why, you know, with whatever paint line you're using, you really want to follow these recommendations. When you're dealing with fiberglass, when you're dealing with raw plastic, it's going to produce some of the static charge. You have to use something that's very safe.
Yeah.
So we know right now we kind of have two really great things going on. We're super clean solvent-wise. We did our 902, and then we got it really good and scuffed and ready for our sealer. But prior to that, we want to make sure this plastic is perfect. So this 910 water-based cleaner is going to do a great job getting off any fingerprints or sweat marks, maybe any dry water residue from our rinsing process. After that's done, even though it's an anti-static to an extent, it's not a full anti-static. So you have a couple options there. In the RM line, there's a product called 903, which he will use here momentarily when he's done. Essentially, it's a really, really refined alcohol-based product. So what it's going to do is you're going to wet the rag down, really, really saturate it. And as you wipe your part, it'll evaporate as you're tracking. So as you move, it starts disappearing. And the idea is for that to really eliminate all of that leftover static. Now, I know that Kristen's a big fan, and I am too, of these anti-stat guns. There's a couple of them out in the market. They all have their high points, low points, what have you. Have you guys had, you guys go into a lot of shops working for SATA. Are you seeing the stat guns be more prevalent, with where you guys are?
I am. In fact, the brand stat gun, the one that we're going to use in here, I'm seeing more and more. The biggest contributors, one, plastic, SMC fiberglass is all naturally has static, but airflow and friction. So you're in a booth that's a downdraft booth that's flowing air over plastic, as well as the friction of tacking it off and waxing, greasing it. You're building up a static in there. So using a product that is like an isopropanol alcohol type of wipe down solution will start killing that static,
Right.
but only to a point, right? It's going to build up, it's going to continue to build as it's just sitting in the booth. So using the stat guns, I've actually seen really, really good results with them.
Yeah, I agree with that totally, and I think there's an interesting thing we kind of found with that, and metal can take a charge as well, and it's so ironic that when the stat guns came out and we thought about them only for plastic, think about how many times you drug plastic over a metal car, stretched it out, start trimming it, and your hair is grabbing that plastic. If it's charged enough to pull your hair, it's charged enough to charge that car. So whether it's an anti-stat liquid or a gun, I think the application or the use of an anti-stat on every job you do does a fantastic job of really eliminating that. I think, and once again, to kind of revert back to you, Chris, we've noticed just kind of by trial and finding it out that when you use a stat gun or a stat material on a panel, whether it's metal or plastic, that metallic tends to lay down a little bit better.
Sure.
So, in your opinion, what do you think the reason is? It the stat charge and you're dealing with metal?
It's kind of hard to say. Some of the aluminums it has an effect on, micas and pearls for sure. Something that is itself a synthetic material that's coated that can hold static, it can change the orientation. To add to your anti-stat on the metal parts, when you do bag that vehicle and you feel all that static, leave the static on the plastic. Anti-stat the metal surfaces and the substrates that you're painting, but if you leave the static in the plastic, what happens is as that dust or lint or overspray that's in the booth air, rather than it migrating to that, it's always that second coat of clear coat, right, when everything looks perfect and it lands in it, leaving static in the plastic that's just covering the rest of the vehicle will attract that static and that lint and dust and keep it out of the paint job. So your jobs do come out cleaner, not only from anti-statting your substrate that you're painting, but also leaving some of the static present in the plastic that you're bagging.
That's a really good point, and just like you said, I mean, if it can draw, I'd rather it draw to the plastic than draw to my hood or my fender or my door. I mean, without question. He's, I think right now he's getting ready to, you activating and reducing your sealer. Mm-hmm. So we're going to kind of move into this process. Are you going to use a B120 tack case?
Yes, sir.
So right now he's ready to go as far as cleanliness, anti-stat, all that stuff. He's going to go in there. He's mixing the sealer up right now. This is a really cool product that RM has. It's called 875 and 876. It's actually a sealer, adhesion promoter, all in one. So the cool thing is, like our old method up until maybe a year or two ago was same process: adhesion promoter followed by a sealer, followed by your base coat. So now we're able to eliminate one of these steps and keep a gun a little bit cleaner. So he'll go in here and he'll apply one coat of this. The ratio on it is 4 to 1 to 2. It takes 4 parts of the sealer, 1 part of activator. In this case, we're going to use RMH55. It's a fast hardener, and then 2 parts of reducer. So it's a thinner sealer, tends to dry a little bit quicker. It dries exceptionally flat, and as we know, the sealers have come such a long way. Way back, 15 years ago, somebody wanted you to seal something, you're like, man, it's going to be dirtier, it's going to have some orange peel in it, some texture. And the companies have done a really great job with these urethanes and refining the resin packs and making these things lay as flat as we need them to as painters.
Sure.
And
start out with orange peel in your surface before you've even got the color.
Exactly. Right? We don't have to worry about, let it dry for an hour and try to flatten out some of this texture. We're smooth out of the gate. So we're going to have this 20-minute flash time after he applies this coat of sealer. And what we wound up doing, we talked earlier about gray shades and our ground coats. So the color that we're doing on this job for the customer is Toyota 1C8. So very heavy in black. It's got some blue pearl, some gold pearl, some red pearl. So a pearlescent color, but very, very dense, a very opaque color. So we're going to go with a straight up, what do we have, 876? So we're going to go straight up 876 on this, which they call it dark gray. In my mind, it's almost a pure black. For this color, that's going to be spectacular, great coverage. It'll cover well. Everything about it should be really good. I know you guys have something kind of fun that you want to talk about here. So, before we had our system set up for our sealer gun, our base gun, our clear gun, and up until 15 minutes ago, I wasn't even aware of this. So he's going to try a brand new piece of equipment from SATA right now. I don't know if you knew that, but you're going to try something you never used before. You good?
He's a professional.
He'll be fine. So yeah, why don't you guys talk about this gun setup?
So, you brought up a couple things. The process there with having the adhesion promoter built into the sealer. To take a step back, because that's obviously new for RM, but it's really kind of new as a whole in our industry. So typically you threw down an adhesion promoter, there was a certain amount of flash time that went with that, then you'd spray sealer.
Yep.
And as I'm sure you've experienced with solvent-borne base coats, you can get into sometimes with certain paint brands a sensitive window.
Yes.
Where if your film build a sealer isn't good enough to avoid solvent penetration of the base coat, you get a wrinkle, right? And then now you're chasing that wrinkle across the bumper. So that's a super advantage of going to a sealer that has the AdPro built in. On the other side of that, film build on sealers was critical. You really needed above 0.7 mils up to 1 mil to have that holdout of solvent penetration.
Right.
So we were really focused on film builds, but also trying to dial in a primer gun, a proper primer gun that would spray sealer and maintain that super flat finish, not only being able to seal whole panels, but doing spot sealing. This goes back to our conversation with color match where we're talking about you can have a primer spot in the right G shade or in the right gray value, but if you don't have that soft taper, that soft overspray edge, after putting on 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 12 coats of certain colors, you're still gonna see that hard primer spot. So having not only a sealer gun that's gonna give us film build on full panel application, but it's also gonna be controllable where we have a nice soft sealer edge so we can make that transition from sealer color to body color in our blend with low opacity colors, and it's all gonna be nice and invisible. So what we've done is we more or less, in our Jet 100B RP spray gun, typically a 1.4 was the most popular based across the country of what most people use for sealer.
Right.
This is what we would categorize as like an optimized 1.4.
Okay.
So though the 1.4 is still a fantastic option for a lot of sealer that's out there, this one just takes it that little bit further in finer atomization, smoother finishes, easy to spot seal, helps that sealer flash off fast while maintaining your film builds.
Awesome. So I guess, me as a painter, I have my SATAs, I have all my equipment, and there's, I guess, maybe 2 questions here for you guys on this. Something I would run into all the time back when I was tech repping constantly is you would go into a shop and they have a great, 5,000 HVLP with a 1.4 and they have their 1.2 RP, everything's digital, everything's perfect. And then you have this redheaded stepchild in the corner, their old retired M1G, and I said, what's that for? That's my sealer gun, and it's really incredible that maybe we just have not done a great job of explaining why we have an undercoat gun, why we have a top coat gun. So as maybe some advice for some painters out there, regardless of paint line, picking that gun for sealer, what's the best way to go about that?
The differences between top coat guns and undercoat guns really comes down to pattern, size, shape, and atomization. Your top coat guns are really, really focused on atomization, very, very fine, high transfer efficiency levels, as well as it's ultimately focused on metallic and pearl orientation. We don't want to be creating model with the spray gun. So it puts it at an atomization level that's very, very high. And most primers and sealers don't necessarily need that level. So when we do have that practice of taking my old RP13 clear, I got my R2000, and I demote that down to a sealer gun because I bought a new clear or a base coat gun, you're taking a gun that's designed for very, very fine atomization. And when you talk about that in primers, you start talking about bridging over sand scratches,
right?
Where you're atomizing the product so fine that that droplet's not wet enough to penetrate down into the bottom of that scratch. Then that's a scenario where you've got guys complaining about shrinking.
Right.
You've got sand scratch, they call it sand scratch swelling, but nothing's swelling, it's actually shrinking, right?
Yes.
Same thing with sealer. You want that balance, and that's where this new sealer nozzle set comes into play, is it's finding that balance of keeping it wet enough to fill any of those minor imperfections that we all try to get away with and hide under sealer,
yep,
while maintaining that nice smooth finish and getting ready to go into base coat.
But the other thing about a top coat gun, the nozzles were designed to do a blend with, and you wanted some transparency on that blend edge. With a primer gun, you really don't want that overspray to be traveling all the way down the panel where it could cause issues for you. So you want that to have the wet zone, but to have enough atomization so there's a fine edge transition from sealer or from primer to the surface underneath, but you don't want it carrying all the way down the panel. You want to keep it minimized right to where you need it. So that's where the primer guns are more focused in that design.
So, a question maybe for you guys too on the undercoat gun, right? a thing that I'm a huge fan of, and I think everybody should do, and we talked about it earlier, was, you know, having your mill cards. I like to build a bulletproof file, if you will, for somebody doing a paint job, because the paint manufacturers, you know, they do offer a good warranty. They absolutely do, and they'll stand behind their product. And something that I think is critical for shops is to really document, you know, the mill rates of these things, you know, and your primer sanded versus your wet on wet sealers versus your base coats. They're gonna have their minimum and maximum mill rates for these products, right? So, you know, maybe from the gun manufacturer perspective, do you guys see an issue where I do try to take this old retired base gun or clear gun, and now I'm gonna make this my sealer gun? You know, what could I look at either end of the spectrum for a potential mill issue?
Yeah, absolutely, we see it constantly, and that's where the wrinkle window came in. We saw more, there were reported issues with the product line that came in where sealer was applied with an old top coat gun, rather than those shops we started flipping to a sealer gun or a primer gun.
Okay.
And it is because the atomization is so fine, it starts naturally migrating to thinner film builds. And if you try pushing it, taking that top coat gun and pushing it so you're trying to maintain film build, then you start getting into that area of, are you over applying? Are you going to start getting runs on edges or fog light pockets, as we may see here in a little bit with KC?
Right. Are you getting ready to seal?
I got a hood.
We have to get you a hood? Got to get them hooked up.
That's what we didn't consider.
So we'll get this. Obviously, PPE is critical. Here, let's get you hooked up.
And it done been done. Yeah.
So we'll get him rolling in the booth here. You know, as you can see, he's putting fresh air on. Any of you guys that watch his YouTube channel or follow him on, you know, Instagram or Facebook, he's always really good with the PPE. You know, he breathes fresh air at the shop in his booth. You know, and some of the stuff that he's breathing in or could be breathing in if he wasn't going this route is dangerous. You know, we have our epoxies. They're sticky. You know, he does a lot of stuff with spray polyester, and you know, these things aren't safe for us as people. So it's important that he's got his full suit on, he's got his boots on, he's got gloves on right now. You know, Tony's getting him hooked up with his fresh air. Then all of these things are a factor, and they're all things that us as painters need to be aware of. Perfect. You could be in a photo shoot for RM Safety right now. We'll give you a minute. So Tony, you know, he's got this stuff on right now. This question comes up all the time. I have a SATA hood and I have my belt. Can I run a whip hose or can I not run a whip hose? And if I can't, why can't I? And if I can, why can't I?
Well, in the USA, we're talking about, NIOSH has, who is the people that do give the approvals on breathing equipment, breathing hoods, etc., does not NIOSH approve a whip hose. So it has to be a system. So the system includes your belt unit, your hood, and your hose. So we have to have separate approvals on different lengths of hose. So we have separate approval on a 15-footer, a 25-footer, a 35, 50, 75, and 100, because they test it with that length of hose, with that belt unit, with that hood. And the minute that you start pulling more air away from the hood using a whip hose off of the belt unit, their concern at NIOSH is that you could negatively impact the positive pressure of your hood. Not everybody may have enough air volume.
Right.
And so we're literally the only place in the world where we can't run a whip hose. But they also, so what SATA has done to help with NIOSH is by putting this gauge on the AirVision 5000 that has a green zone in it. So when your needle is up in the green zone, you know that you have positive pressure. So at a glance, I know that I do. But with that being said, they still won't allow us to have a whip hose here in the US legally.
So on this regulator, Tony, so we're gonna have basically zero. We have no air coming in,
Right.
and then we're gonna have this green where we're in our green zone.
Right.
What's happening here where we're hitting too much pressure, and so what happens with that?
Overpressure, more than anything, is a waste of air volume. It can be limited in a shop. Secondly, overpressure can be more of a comfort level, so that you don't have the air drying your eyes, blowing in your eyes, etc. So you want it to be comfortable. But what's nice about the AirVision 5000 is this thing only uses from 6 to, let's say, 12 CFM. So in most cases,
That's low.
if we run an average, I would say it's at 10. But definitely it'll run as low as 6 CFM, depending on your comfort level that you want to have.
Yeah, I think, it's one of those things where we try to be diligent about this and explaining why these things, are here for us and why we need to use them. And, I'm as guilty as everybody else. When I got in this business, I had a half mask respirator, and sometimes I wore gloves and sometimes I did it, and I'd wear a t-shirt, and I thought that was okay. And luckily, at a younger age, in my early 20s, I learned that this probably wasn't something I should be doing, and I got adapted into the fresh air, and I got adapted into wearing a paint suit. And looking at kind of the way the industry is going now, especially with our waterborne coatings, our body is water, and while this water base is spectacular for the environment, I think that there is a misconception because we look at house paint and we don't look at it as a dangerous thing, and now we're looking at these automotive paints that are water based, and our body's water, and maybe guys got a little lax on that.
Well,
So
I think what is important to note is obviously then water will absorb through your skin and mix with the fluids in your eyes, with the fluid, your body fluids.
Right.
Much easier than solvent ever did.
Right.
And so it's more important than ever, although it doesn't have the strong odors. There's still resins, there's still co-solvents, there's things in that we definitely don't need our blood's getting into our bloodstream, because it doesn't just affect our lungs, where we always thought we just had to cover up with a charcoal mask. Well, that doesn't work, because now with water and even with solvent, we're dealing with a lot more microscopic size molecules that absorb through your skin faster too. So today more than ever, we need to keep ourselves covered up with paint suits, which we'll talk about when we're waiting for sealer to dry. You need to keep yourself covered up, keep your eyes, keep your face, keep your hair, everything covered, because it all absorbs. And now it doesn't just affect, once it's absorbed, it doesn't just affect your lungs, it affects your whole circulatory system, your respiratory system, your nervous system, all of that, and your liver has to filter all that out of your blood. We don't need that extra stress on our body. So we have things available that make it perfectly safe, but we have to use that. We have to be smart about it.
yeah, and I think that sometimes because we're healthy, most of us are, we don't think about it. Oh, I'm fine, and there's not going to be an issue here, and that's a scary road to travel.
Well, I was invincible when I was a young painter and working, in my previous life to SATA. And so today, because of that, I take a Advair discus inhaler and a pill called Accolade every day so that I'm not so sensitized, so I can walk in a shop and do what I do, and it doesn't bother me like it did. Had I been smarter about that younger. And that's down to the thing, none of us, even you're walking in the booth to shoot a spray out card, cover up. It doesn't mean don't go in and hold your breath and paint the spray out card.
My face is exposed, I'm exposed, my eyes are exposed.
Cover up. And on the, I guess, other side of things, the marketing side of things, if you're a shop that's marketing to customers, you want to appear professional.
Right.
And when you see someone on a TV show that's wearing a half mask or not at all, or in the booth with just shorts on or not covered up, and then you see a guy like when KC goes in, fully suited, with a supplier hood, which one looks more professional?
Right,
which one
absolutely.
would you want to have your multi-$100,000 car painted at, or your everyday driver? You want to have it done somewhere that's respectable and is doing a good job running the business and takes care of their employees.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it ties together. There's a marketing aspect to it as well.
There really is, and it's you have shops, and then everybody's advertising now. I'm going green, and I've gone green, and that's all great stuff. I mean, we have a lot of things going on where the water base can help our environment. These are all wonderful things. Something interesting, and I use it almost as a teaching tool more than anything now, is a can of catalyst, and I use it as a dual teaching tool. Number one, wintertime, especially where I'm at in Pennsylvania, where you are in Minnesota, our humidity isn't super high. There's not a lot of water in the air. So if I take my catalyst and I put my cap half on, it may take a couple days, and then I'll start getting some crystallization. I do that in July. The next morning I come in, the cap is seized up, and I have hard catalyst.
Right.
And what I learned several years ago, and I'm so glad that I did, is that's happening because isocyanates are attracted and activated by that moisture.
Yep.
So I go into that booth with a half mask, and I'm protecting my lungs and my nose, which is moist, and my mouth, which is moist. But what about my eyes?
Right.
And my eyes are moist all the time. They're open. I'm painting. I'm blinking. And that stuff is hitting me right in the face. If it's doing it to a can of catalyst,
Yeah.
what's it doing it to my body?
Right, and that goes equally for when we're standing there pouring straight catalyst into a clear coat. Really need to be smarter about it and having your hood on,
So I think there's,
protection on when you're in that mixing room, and having an air supply hose in your mixing room to plug in so that you can be safe while you're mixing paint, not just spraying.
I've gotten some, maybe mixed information myself on that, and you can probably shed some light on this. I have my own opinion. I want to see where you fall with it. Guys will say, well, I'm pouring the hardener in. It's not a big deal because it's not in the air. My thought, and maybe elaborate on this if I'm right or wrong, is the catalyst on the outside of that can that I put on wasn't atomized either,
Right.
and that catalyzed. So what's happening there? Me as a painter, have my RPS cup, I'm stirring up my clear, or I'm pouring the hardener in. What's happening during that process to me that I'm dealing with?
Well, it's still, there's an evaporation, obviously, when the lid's off. And you're inhaling, and if you're pouring, it's open in the air, and you're getting those fumes that are coming up out of that can as you're pouring. You're getting those fumes. If you don't have a respirator on you, obviously you can smell that being added. So if you're inhaling that, it may not necessarily be the atomized work that's getting in your lungs, but it's definitely the inhaling of those fumes. There is chemicals, there's things in that your body doesn't need.
Right.
And so for us, it's just protect yourself. I can't. We don't know what every paint mixing room has for air, ink, ventilation, all that stuff. We don't know that. So to be safe, you just need to protect yourself and have that, keep that coverage. You don't want to be smelling those odors. You go home at the end of the day, you can taste it, you can smell it. You don't want that. You want to go home at the end of the day and not have that issue. That's why we wear paint suits to cover up, so you don't go home at night and smell like that can of paint. But your lungs don't need that either, neither do your eyes, anything else. So it's just protect yourself. You should wear eye protection if you're mixing. If you get a splash, drop the mixing stick in the cup, anything like that. But the hood does that for you as well. Plus gives you a nice cool air blowing on you, because by the end of the day it's 95 degrees in here. Every time you walk in and out of the booth and the bake cycle's been on, that's a cooling effect too, so it's a comfort.
And that's another great point. A lot of times, with the paint companies, and Chris, you've been here, you've done this. They have advertisements, and then these advertisements, whether it's a trifold or a brochure, or you go to a training center, in the pictures of their personnel, they're fully garbed up. And I can say, speaking as a person that was a tech rep for a lot of years and worked, under BASF, they're very particular about that. And they want you to be protected. They want you to have gloves. They want you to have goggles. They want you to have a mask on. They want you to do all these things. It's not a show. It's not something that they're trying to get a sales pitch on, or they want to look a certain way. They want to protect their people. And when you go to these training centers and you see 50 SATA hoods on the wall, and you see 50 SATA suits, and you see boxes of gloves, that's not for show. This is to help us be able to do this until we retire. This isn't something where, they want to keep us around for a long time. They want to keep us using and buying paint. Right. And our health is important, right? So, a question I get all the time is, I have a half mask. Where can I use this half mask, and where can I not use the half mask?
For me, it shouldn't be in the paint booth. I think for people in the welding shop that have a great shield or a nice hood, that auto tints and everything they need it to do, wear it under there. If you're breathing those kind of gases and things, that's a great place to wear a half mask. If you want to have air supplied half mask for, sanding, it certainly gives you some clean air and things like that. But having the half mask in the paint booth is not what we would feel is the 100% correct way. It certainly helps. It's certainly better than having just a charcoal mask. We're still getting a source of air that's coming into that mask that's giving you clean air for your lungs because it's being pulled from outside the paint booth. But if you're going to have paint spraying in that booth, you still have your issues with your eyes. Yes, you can wear hoods, and we have hoods on our paint suits. Yes, you can have goggles or glasses. The best case is just keep your complete self covered up.
Right. And I wish I wish everybody did a better job of not only teaching it, but learning it.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where I think a half mask is fine. If I'm a body guy and I'm sanding body filler or something, or I'm sweeping the shop up, it's gonna protect me from that particulate. And I think the thing that is so important is that half mask cannot protect you from isocyanates.
No.
It doesn't have the ability to do it. And there's a reason why when you look at OSHA regulations, they require fresh air. This isn't something that got fabricated.
Yeah. And when you're talking half mask, because we make an air supply to half mask.
I'm talking about disposable style
But if you're just talking about a charcoal respirator,
right.
there is, with a disposable charcoal respirator, there is no one says on their website, hey, go ahead and use this with isocyanates. They all say, do not. You know, that's the deal.
Well, and ISOs are the easiest thing to point out. I think it's a universal thing through most paint companies is clears, sealers. They contain isocyanates to a certain level, catalyzed base coat. But it doesn't stop there, right? That's just what we're always talking about. But even uncatalyzed base, there's plenty of chemicals. Any liquid coating that you're being exposed to, whether it's a wax or grease remover or anything, your skin on your body is the biggest organ. It's going to do the most absorption of those chemicals. Back in the day, I used to have the motto of I'd rather be a good liver than have one. Right. Since then, I've changed my tune on that because I understand PPE and we can be in this business a long, long time. It shouldn't be the chemicals taking their wear and tear on your body that's slowing you down. It should purely just be with age. You know, you should be able to stay in this business in a paint booth. You talk to any old painter, you know, mentors that I had throughout my early career, and it was always the guys that were always referencing, man, I need to get out of the paint booth before it kills me. That shouldn't be in our vocabulary. You shouldn't be exposed inside the paint booth, especially when there's companies like us that have this stuff. There's no reason to. You can protect yourself fairly easy with minimal investment.
Yeah. I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head right there, and you know, not all fresh air is created equal. You know, it just isn't, and it can go from just the comfort of it to, you know, how is this thing actually functioning? And I learned a trick a couple years ago from Jim Kavadik, and I personally never knew this. If you take certain manufacturers' fresh air hoods and you pop the hood off and look up inside that visor, there can be overspray in there. And if there's overspray inside of your fresh air hood, you really got to question how much fresh air am I getting and how much of this overspray am I absorbing? You know, so for a guy that's never looked inside of a certain helmet and saw that, you know, what's your guys' thoughts on basically what's going on there?
It's not having a solid cape and a solid seal around your chin and neck. You know, I'm a facial hair guy, so I totally prefer fresh air just for that safety. But having that cape, having that anti-static cape around that helmet, Velcroed in front, the helmet's down, it's secure underneath your neck. The problem is though most of those are positive, they're positive air pressure respirators, so there's more air going into those helmets than, even our helmet, than you can take in one breath. That's what keeps that positive air flowing out of it, keeps the overspray out. The issue is with some of those other helmets, the way they seal around you, or the lack thereof of sealing, or not having that cape, is they pull that overspray in. The air venting out of the one part of the helmet is pulling air in the other part of the helmet, and that's where you're getting that overspray on the inside of your lenses.
Interesting. So, well, he got the sealer on. We probably have, I would guess, around 15 more minutes for this thing to mat out. Yep. You guys have some stuff out here, and you know, we hit on the helmet a little bit. Maybe if you guys could take some time here and talk about, you know, the way the belt apparatus works, the way the heater and cooler are, you know, and the paint suit.
Well, I think before we can have breathing air, or safe breathing air, we also have to have clean air. And so that's a big part of this, is having a filtration system that's going to give me the air that I can trust, that's coming in from outside the spray booth, so coming from my compressed air, going through this filter and into my booth. Now, this filter system is going to give me two things. It's going to give me clean air for breathing. Now I have breathable air quality, so my spray paint jobs are much cleaner because I'm not blowing oil and sludge and contaminants, rust particles, all the debris that's coming through the airlines. We don't use a desiccant media in this, so I don't have bits of silica that are fracturing and breaking off and coming into the booth, because when you look at a desiccant media filter, The last stage is the desiccant, and when you get that wet, it swells, fractures, breaks, and all those particles blow through your hose, come right into your paint job, and you'll be looking at a paint job wondering, where am I getting these pinholes? And then you magnify that, and you look and they're tiny little white specks, or little shiny specks. That's all broken down silica. That's a contaminant that just messed up my paint job. So SATA took a little different route with that, and they went with this filtration system that cleans the air all the way down to 0.01 microns. So 10 times finer than majority of the filters that are out there. But it has a front stage filter that has an automatic water drain valve, so you're not having to go over to the wall and drain it. Yeah. So the drain valve on the bottom of that gives you automatic drain. So it comes with a clear plastic hose that we either run like in a full graded booth. Like this one, you can run that hose down below the filter matting so that
under the pit.
So you're not blowing. But secondly, quite honestly, it shouldn't be in the booth. So like you'll see in this booth, there's just regulators in here. We put the filtration outside the booth and we plumb in so that we keep all of that oil and debris completely away from our paint area. It goes through a big water cyclone device in the first stage that rotates that air. And as that rotates the air, it throws those large particles to the outside where they auto drain. Then it goes through inside 5 micron sintered bronze element that has a huge surface area. And that collects on the outside all of the debris. So like once every 6 months, I hand screw the canister off, hand screw a nut off the bottom, and I clean that sintered bronze element with thinner and with a nylon brush, and I blow it dry from the inside out and put it back in once every 6 months. So then we go to the second stage where we have our microfine filter element that's down to 0.01 microns. And that collects on the inside. So many times people will pull this cover off and think, oh, my filter still looks clean. Well, it's all on the inside. If it's oily and dirty on the outside, you really have a mess.
You're too late.
Yeah. So that's replaced in a waterborne shop once every 6 months. Okay. If we're in a solvent shop, you can go a year with it. You know, because solvent is a little more lenient, and that's, you know, it mixes with the thinner and everything else. So, but then we go the magic stage, I guess that you call it, is this end is our carbon filter. So if we're going to spray waterborne, we don't want even oil in even the vapor form. So this eliminates oil all the way down to the vapor form. So that part is nice for giving us absolutely clean air. Plus now I have good clean breathing air because of the carbon. Removes odors. It removes everything down to like 0.005.
You know, on the oil vapor thing, that's such a great point, because the amount of shops I've gone into where they have this intermittent fisheye problem or these really tiny fisheye problem, and I take my testing equipment in, I can't find anything, right? It's not giving me an oil stain on my wafer. It may smell like oil, but I can't physically see anything. Right. So, you know, the oil vapor is very critical. And, you know, for a shop that it runs into these, you know, very micro small fisheyes or some of these issues they have, you know, how, for them, you know, what's the reason that this thing is able to protect from oil vapor?
Well, because when you're pulling it down to vapor size, we got to imagine, if especially in a waterborne shop, because in a waterborne shop, that whole old saying where oil and water don't mix is definitely comes true in a paint job. Right. And because if we can eliminate all oil right down to the vapor form, what happens is between coats, oil would rise to the surface, and that vapor can rise, and then as it almost condenses, it lays on your surface, and then you try to spray another coat of waterborne base, and you don't get fish eyes with water. It tries to run away from the contaminant, so you'll get some real strange looking patterns that can happen. So we eliminate that through this by bringing that down to 0 oil vapor. So we have clean air for breathing. But what also is important is the spraying side. Now, if I'm just going to spray solvent, I could live with just the first 2 stages. And many times that's what we have. We have a 2-stage filter out there. If I'm going to breathe that air, then I need to have a belt unit like this that has a carbon filter inside of it, so my breathing air is clean.
And this is different than the old one, right?
Yeah, this is unique. If I can have you hold this.
Sure.
So in this one, the carbon unit is just built inside. So this pulls out. It's a sintered porous carbon filter. So it lasts for 3 months, and you replace it. When you push this back in, you just have to press till that O-ring seals on the inside and put this back on. So it's that simple to change that. Once every 3 months, you change one carbon filter. Now, if I have more than one painter in my shop, then it doesn't make sense to change 4 of those when I could just change 1 of these. Or if I have more than 2 painters in my shop, then we just run a belt unit like this.
No carbon.
No carbon, because we've got the carbon here. So now we have this belt unit, and on this particular model of our 5000, what's nice is you can adjust this. I can rotate that, turn that, so whatever way I want my hose coming out up my back, or I want the hose aimed maybe more to the floor, or I want it aimed up higher to go straight out, or I can aim that whatever way I want.
Very
And
convenient.
these just slide on and off your belt. So you can put your belt on, you know, so it's easier to clip, where you don't have the weight hanging on it, so it's not swinging around. And then these just slide on. So the same belt works with either carbon or without carbon. So that part's nice. So then we have the belt. Now your hood. Chris mentioned a couple things about the hood that's really important, and it's comfort, number one. But you need visibility and comfort, and you need to be able to hear what's going on around you. So SATA has lowered the decibels of this thing down to like 64 decibels. So it's incredibly quiet. So if I've got to hear, you know, things that are going on around me, I can still hear. But more importantly, they widened the field of vision with this to 220 degrees, so it has a real wide field of vision. And we've been talking a lot about static today.
I
that's-
did not know this about the
and
the shield. So
this is what's cool. So the SATA shields, what's nice about it is we only have one layer. So we don't have a hard plastic lens or a glass lens that gets scratched or dirty and you're looking through debris. I have one layer. So this is on here, but what also is important is this layer is thin, it's easy to see through, you don't get glare, but it's also treated with an anti-static treatment because I don't want the overspray coming towards me as a painter, I want it going away. The other thing is the cape on this is lined with, there's tiny pinstripes in this, is carbon fiber sewn into the cape, and carbon fiber is permanently anti-static. It doesn't wash off when you wash this cape. And this cape just peels off. There's Velcro on it, so you can peel this off, throw it in the wash machine. You just align the SATA logo in the front of it and stick it back on. So it's really that simple, but that doesn't wash off. Plus all of the insides, the plastic portions of this are all anti-static. Anti-static treatment is infused right into the plastic. And then Chris mentioned this part, and this is the hygienic insert. So this piece, when it gets dirty, you can replace it. But this is a piece that fits then under your chin, and it helps to keep paint out, but it keeps pressure in, and it allows you, these hoods are what we call a loose-fitting hood in NIOSH. So we got an approval as a loose-fitting positive pressure hood. So now you'll have air comes out all the way around the face instead of being drawn in. So like he mentioned, when I breathe out, I'm not sucking air in from another portion because it's completely positive pressure. So that part of it is nice. And then we have these sweatbands on these hoods. So these sweatbands pops right off, and you just put them back on, they bend, and when they fit that curve on the headband, then they don't come off. So we have these for comfort, and they just added, now all the hoods that come out have a new comfort liner for the rear of the head where the knob is.
Is that something, if you have the hood, didn't have this, you can order it? You
can just get these. They come in a 3-pack.
Nice.
And so those are nice to have that for just comfort. So the hood's fully adjustable for dimensions as well as for height. So you can adjust that to fit each individual's head. So super comfortable. We mentioned the gauge on there, so you know you're in a green zone, you have enough air. A comfortable belt, but we also wanted to add a couple of features. In the past, we've always had air warmers for the old AirVision 2000, but with this one, we added the AirVision 5000. We also added an air cooler. So what's nice about this, you're in a bake booth and it's hot all day long. You're in there and you just want to have some degree of comfort. This plugs into your belt unit. You just wear it on the opposite hip of the other one, and you plug your hood into this, and you've got an adjustment knob on the bottom of this, and it'll take whatever air temp's coming out of your airlines, and you can lower it by as much as 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can give yourself nice air conditioning, you know.
That's awesome.
So that part is awesome. But where we also have an issue is where I live in Minnesota, maybe even where you live in the winter, and we've got people that are using their compressors, maybe pulling air from outside when it's cold out, or you're running refrigerant dryers. Sometimes that can be irritating to a painter, having a refrigerated air all day long, and it becomes too cool for their breathing and they get too dry.
Yeah.
So we have the option of adding an air warmer. So now it can take that refrigerated air that may be very cold, and you can warm it up by up to 60 degrees. So we have both options that mount, and they just snap onto that belt unit right on the opposite side. So we have some great options. We also have, you know, anti-static breathing hoses that are odorless. They don't allow anything to wick through from the outside in, so no contamination can get in. There's a liner inside that doesn't allow that, plus a secondary liner that's actually like a canvas cord that wraps around that, so that if you run over it, you can't shut your air off on a breathing hose. Or you get it caught in the grate a little bit and pull on it, you'll still be able to breathe. You know, so they've done a lot of things with this to have a proper breathing hose that's anti-static and odor-free. You know, so those are great benefits, but I think what we really need to look at when we talk again about filtration, as painters today with water, we need more air volume than we've ever needed.
Right.
HVLP spray guns with 15 CFM, a hood with 10. We're going to show when they're done base coating this thing later, we're going to use an air blower. And if you're going to be blowing air on that to dry it, you need that to be clean, oil-free. You don't want to be blowing contaminants onto your surface and then hope for good results. So this filter that we have here, our 400 series, is a 129.6 CFM filter. And so for 4 painters,
That's a lot. That's
you can
good.
run it off of one filter and
Right.
run your whole paint shop. The 200 series that we have has the same filter media, but the 200 series filter is a 70 CFM unit. So if I've got a 15 horse compressor that only makes 60 CFM, I can use that 200 series filter, get the same filtration. It's just a lower CFM unit, and it's about 28% less money. So there's some savings that you can do there, but both of them give you breathing air quality for breathing and painting.
Awesome. Yeah. So we can see now he actually started to base coat this thing, and like I said, he's spraying the Onyx HD, the Onyx water. Chris, you were in there. What were you helping him with out in there?
Well, we were just talking about the sealer. He got a little piece of dust.
Okay.
Even after all the prep we do, right, you still get that little piece of dust in there. We were talking about our normal process, or what KC and I would consider our normal process
Right.
for denibbing that out.
Okay.
Do you nib it out in the sealer? Do you throw your first coat of base coat on and then go in with some, 600, 800, depending on how bad it is, to nib it out?
Yeah, so for this 875, 876 Ad Pro sealer is what it's called. It dries pretty quick. So in about 20 minutes, you're not at a hard film, but you're pretty stable. So if you want to take that 600 and give a little bit of love there, knock it down, it's totally cool.
Okay.
The nice thing about this sealer is there's so many times where you prepped it like you said, everything looks great, but now I have it gouged and I see it. Great aspect of this is I can put a second coat on, now treat it almost like a thicker filling sealer, give it a quick bake or let it dry for an hour, go back in there, hit it real good, go back to my base
So if
coat.
you see something as you're putting that first coat on,
I can add a second.
give it a flash time,
Give it a
and then
flash,
put the
second coat on.
Okay.
So that, that's a really great thing about this. Like we said, he's spraying the Onyx right now, and the Onyx paint that KC uses, made by RM, is a really interesting product. And the thing that's cool about it is it's actually a urethane hybrid system. So if you see an Onyx bank, and we're going to look at one shortly, we're going to see the mixing process. It's a bunch of half-liter and full-liter toners that are standard old mixing style with an agitating lid, but it doesn't become water until you make it water. And the really great thing about that is when you have these concentrated urethanes, I can convert them to a solvent. And for shops that are in really high humidity areas, but they're also strangle-held by a VOC, they don't have to worry about a high humidity day because they can convert to a solvent. So for KC shop out in Texas, believe it or not, a lot of people think that Texas is hot and dry all the time. It's not the case. I've gone in that shop in the mornings and the floor is soaking wet. The great part about what he's doing is he can spray water or he can spray solvent. And for him, it's 2 clicks of the button, convert to solvent, pick my color. Now I change my additives and I'm a solvent-borne base coat. So it's pretty much the only line that exists that you're able to do this waterborne to solvent-borne conversion. And a couple cool things about it are, if you're going to do something like a cut-in, you're able to take your toner load and put it into a clear coat and now have a simulated single stage for inside parts use. The other thing you can do to cut your cycle time way down is take a transparent sealer, able to put toner load inside of that, a coat and a half or 2 coats. I have full coverage of maybe an underhood cover and a semi-gloss or satin sheen, and I'm fully protected. So it's very versatile as far as that goes. I know we had earlier talked about viscosity, and all the paint lines have a certain viscosity they want you to be at. Onyx has done really well as far as not focusing so much on viscosity, but more old school style reduction. So in this event, we're basically reduced at 70%. So the Onyx line has the ability to tailor your waters to either speed it up or slow it down based on humidity. So for this, we use what they call hydro-based 002 normal, and what that's doing is that's converting the toners to an actual water base. After that, we pick our reducer called Hydro Mix, HBO20 or HBO40, and that's our reduction water. The cool thing about this is I like to compare it to orange juice. So if I go to the store, I can buy a gallon of orange juice. A lot of it's water, there's some orange juice in there. I can buy a can of concentrate, and I can load it up with water. So with Onyx, your toner use is very minimum, because since they're so highly concentrated, they're about 15 times stronger than a standard toner. So if I look at a quart of Onyx ready to spray, only about 20% of that is actually toner. So it goes a long way. Great coverage, great dry time. We can see here now, you know, my personal favorite air remover, there's a lot of them out there. The ones I don't like are the ones that come with the metal wafer that I have to soak in lacquer thinner and then try to bend them back in. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about the SATA air mover?
Well, what I guess the important thing is we've had an air mover, air dryer called a dry jet for years. About 5 years ago, SATA reintroduced and came out with the Dry Jet 2. And the Dry Jet 2's advantages are, you'll notice on the front of it, it's got a shaped cone that you can turn. So if I'm blowing flats, I can angle it one direction so it blows more flat surfaces. If I'm blowing down the side, I can do more sides. But what's incredible about this is the air volume that it doesn't use. And that's the important part. When we're adding all these stresses on a compressor, you don't want to have one that uses 20 CFM and then have to use 4 of those in a shop. There's nobody that's got an extra 80 CFM to spare. So with this one at 35 PSI, which is the optimum air pressure in, it only uses 9.35 CFM out or into it. But what's cool about it is it pulls air from the rear side through a strainer that is the same strainers that we use in our 0.3 liter RPS cups. So that's replaceable when it gets dirty. But I can use that. It draws, let's say on average, 10 to 12 times the air, depending on the air volumes you have, etc. So if I put 9.3 in, I'm getting 93.5 CFM out. And the biggest mistake people think is, well, if it works good at 35, I bet at 120 it really blows things dry. And what we don't work with is velocity. We use air volume. We want a huge amount of air blowing it slowly across the surface to scrub that and take the air or water with it. Where if you speed up the air or you're using the small cone-shaped dryers and other things, they speed up the velocity and it blows across the surface and doesn't take the water with it. So you'll get done blow drying something with some of those other tools and go into your mixing room, make your clear, come back in, and it's tacky again, wet again.
Re-wet.
So this one, it carries that away because it's a slow-moving, high volume of air to go across that surface. And we've done, Chris in his former life did a lot of testing with this where they were taking literally sanding dust and covering a table, and we could just show how much wider of a footprint. So it'll blow that. I mean, it's crazy when you can watch the dust that moves when the air goes across. But in better perspective is you took the side of a small SUV and you got paper on the roof and paper off the rocker, and you'll watch the paper move. They're both flapping. It moves air that on the side of a vehicle where you need about half as many of these as you do other brands because it's got such a good footprint. So incredible tool, very, very low CFM, so it's not hurting your compressed air situation, and it's giving you a fast drying.
So yeah, right now this is a great thing he's doing. He does this all the time, and I think most of our painters that are our A+ painters are doing this. The time that D-nib, we're talking about clean base, right? We're not perfect. Stuff's going to happen. We're going to have something fall in, or something comes off the hose or out of the sealing filter or something. So up until this point, we've done everything correctly. He's got a sealer on. He had a little piece of dirt, like Chris had noticed. But optimally, right now, the Onyx system is basically what I would call a 2.5 coat system. So we're going to get our correct sealer ground down. We're going to go full wet coat, which he did. Had about a 7-minute dry time. That's my guess right now by looking at it. A full flash with the SATA. And then now, since it's his first coat, he's going to go in there and do a quick D-nib. After this, he'll put on a second medium wet to wetter coat. We'll flash that really good. And if everything looks covered at that point, we're going to hit it with a drop coat, and it's about done. Yep. So, the thing you want to take note here is that, nibbing the base coat is so important. And it's, when I was younger in the business, I never even knew what denibbing base coat was, because the guy I worked under said, just bury it and clear and sand it out later. But unfortunately, that's not the right way to do things. And we really have to be adamant about denibbing that base coat and getting that base coat as clean as possible, because I can denib base a lot faster than I can wet sand and buff a hood. I personally can. And I think that goes for a lot of guys.
With tri-coats and transparent mid-coats like the Candy mid-coats, the colors nowadays, I was taught the same way, right? Bury it in clear, we'll polish it out. You're going to notice that now. The complexity of the colors, the fineness of the aluminums, the pearls, the ceramics that are in there, everything. You notice those little pieces of dirt that normally you would just bury them in clear, but now it's going to be that black dot on the side of the car. Even in a charcoal metallic like this, it's going to be visible.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, you know, at this stage of the game, it probably took him a minute and a half to denib that. Whereas if I would have had to take those same nibs out in clear, I'm probably 40 minutes. So I'm much rather going to take my time in here. And I think a lot of the point today is not only, you know, proper color match and how we're prepping stuff, but what steps do we take to really get a clean job, you know? And preparation, like he said in the beginning, is absolutely critical. Secondly, which Tony hit on, and I think it's maybe not understood enough, maybe not explained enough by us, but so many dirty paint jobs come from a poor version of this. If you have the best painter in the world, the best booth in the world, but you have dirty air, you're an uphill battle. It's just not going to work for us. And I think it's important, you know, for a shop that has some issues, and maybe you're a really clean painter and your guy's really good, but he can't control that dirt. You guys are out there, you guys are in the field. I mean, to have somebody from SATA come out, or maybe your jobber that works slightly with SATA, give you an air audit, you know, read that humidity, do a particulate test, you know, check for oil vapors, do all these things. It all starts with the compressor, right? So if our compressor isn't maintained, it's trickled down, it's gonna hyper accelerate in here. And since we have the technology and the ability with this filtration, I think sometimes we get sticker shock, right? And we say, oh, well, it's so expensive to do it. If I look at the cost of getting the right air versus the cost of redoing the side of a car, I'm going to go through this all day long. So, you know, when you guys are out in the field, what are some of the common things you see in a shop as far as air, or as far as some of the things that cause them problems that they could learn from us today?
Well, and I think I heard Tony say it before, and I apologize if I'm going to repeat this, but it's good information either way. What I ran into, and one, I'll start this by saying we've got reps coast to coast across this country, and all of them are outfitted with portable 3-stage filter systems. So if you're in a shop, you're struggling with filtration, we can easily have one of our reps come in, bring their portable filter stand, plug your air into it, and then everything on the other side of that filter is SATA clean. The things that I see in my previous life and still currently with SATA and Dan-Am is going into shops that have recently converted to water, and I know Tony mentioned it, I heard the oil vapor issue, but look at compressors nowadays, right? If you're shopping for a new compressor, are you going to be looking at a piston style compressor, or are you going to a rotary scroll or a screw compressor? Most guys are leaning towards screw compressors, which put more oil vapor downline, and when we walk in and we're doing our, you know, cell sheet on the 3-stage filter, we try to explain that to them, and they're like, yeah, but I don't need the third leg, that's just strictly for breathing. And that mentality needs to go away. We need to kill that thought process in this business, because it's not necessarily just for breathing. Yes, that's a happy side effect of it, and that's where it began. But now, the more customers that you're switching to waterborne from solvent, oil vapor removal from the airlines is critical. And we still run into it. Fisheyes are one of the most difficult things to diagnose in a shop, right? It can come from anywhere. It could be the changing of the winds, and the fast food restaurant down the street is now coming in and sucking in your stacks. So we've seen all kinds of causes, from lotions to deodorants to shampoo. You can't imagine. So having a good filter where you know the air inside your pipes and what's coming out of your spray gun, what's coming out of your dry jet 2, what you're utilizing with a stat gun or any other tool that you're plugging in inside the booth, having that confidence, knowing that air is as clean as it could possibly be. It's critical.
Yeah, and Tony brought up something before we went live here today, and it's such an obvious thing, but maybe it's not so obvious. The air that we're breathing, if it's clean enough for me to breathe, it's clean enough for me to blow across this panel, you know? And if you think about that, if it's grade D, I can breathe it in, it's safe for me to breathe. It's the best thing I could possibly use to dehydrate my base coat. There's just nothing that's even going to compare to it. Sure. Right?
Right.
So he's drying the second coat, and it's actually a little cool here right now, but it's drying quite well. Yeah. You know, just for reference, he's using, and I want to talk quick about the gun and the air, well not quick, but about the gun and the air pressure. So that's a 5500 with a 1.4, and the Onyx 1.40. Okay, so I'll let you guys elaborate on that. With the Onyx system, it really likes a 1.4. It just loves it. 25 PSI for your first 2 coats, gives it a nice breakup, and then he's going to get to the point where he's going to do a drop coat or an effect coat. He'll back his distance up, and it'll basically be a mist, and that'll happen right around 17 PSI. So, you know, with these new guns, I was fortunate enough to be on the test market with Mazin, and it was really cool. And when they came to me with a duct tape cap, I wanted to take
What
it.
is this?
I wanted to take it off. You know, and so right now, you know, we're talking about clean jobs and good metallic control and all this stuff. But a painter's job is critical, and something we talk about in C20 Refinish is it's their job to help make sure that department's profitable. And one of the things I personally noticed with this gun was I mixed up, I came from an RP, a 5001 2 RP is my gun, that's what I've used. I mixed up, I did a bedside on a Chevy truck, mixed up the same amount of clear, it was about 25% less product, and my mill rate was still the same. So why don't you guys talk a little bit about, you know, maybe this technology, the I, the O?
Yeah, so this is the 5500, the X5500 that we released last year at SEMA. Some of the major changes that were done to it is, unlike the 5000 where we've got an air distribution ring sitting behind the fluid tip, this now no longer has that air distribution ring. So when you're tightening this fluid tip down, you're tightening it metal to metal. So there's not any over tightening or mushrooming of that air distribution ring that could cause an issue with your pattern and make it a little bit more difficult to clean. The other thing is a nice side effect of removing that portion of the gun is the sound of these guns. You know, perception is reality for a lot of people, and that sound, the decibels coming down on what the gun sounds like at 29 PSI, it gives you that perception of, well, it's so soft, it must be doing better transfer efficiency. Obviously, you know, if you averaged everything out since really back to the NR 2000, we're what, about every 5 years? SATA always releases on the even years for Automechanica, so it's typically either 4 years or 6 years that we'll release or introduce a new gun. But please understand, when we're introducing a new gun, it's not purely just for making things more complex or giving you another option. As soon as we introduce this new gun, we spend those years prior to the next launch developing and focusing on atomization, on transfer efficiency, right? Job cost, or how many ounces per refinish hour, or how many grams per refinish hour, is really starting to come into play in this business, where we're so scrutinized on how much product we use. That's the quickest spot that everybody wants to reduce costs, is in their paint materials. So of course we do demos with our 4400 where we show, you know, touching up small spots, doing priming, but using the right tool for the job that you're doing. It's using a finish hammer with a finish nail, not a 5-pound sledge. The 5500, both HVLP and RP, it has 2 different pattern options. Those pattern options are an I or an O. I've had a couple guys nickname those, and I feel like it's somewhat appropriate. O is original. So if you look at the shape of the O pattern that's in both the HVLP and RP, it's more of that oval. That's what the O actually stands for, is that oval shaped pattern, where it's a little bit shorter, a little bit wider, wetter. There's really 2 different style painters in this business, even though we all are, you know, wonderful little snowflakes and we all paint a little bit differently. We really fall into 2 different categories. You're either a painter that's like I am, close, fast, damn near dragging the air horns through the panel, or you're somebody that's a little bit further back, or what we classify as a controlled painter. Those different styles, rather than taking that one size fits all or one size fits most, having an I or an O, and the O pattern tailored more towards that close, quick painter, and that I pattern a little bit taller, a little bit more controlled. It's going to slow your arm speed down a little bit. It gives you those options when you're going to get your gun. Rather than, you know, we're all painters, or I'm assuming you're all painters that are watching this. You know as well as I do, we get that new gun, or your jobber brings it by to demo it. You go in the booth and you're puckered up on that first job, right? You're worried about, is my color going to turn out right? Do I have good orientation? Then you move into clear coat. You're spraying clear coat with an unfamiliar gun. You really are adapting to the way that gun sprays over those next couple weeks of having that new gun. Now with the approach that we're taking where you have an I pattern or an O pattern, the I pattern, people have nicknamed that improved. It's a taller, narrower, slender pattern that's stretched out a little bit. It's the same amount of material coming out of both, so let me explain this. If I have an RP130 and an RP13I, it's the same amount of material that's coming out of both of them.
Okay.
But your RP or your 130 pattern is roughly at that distance from the panel, it's about 10.5 inches tall, and your I pattern is 12 inches tall. So if you take that same amount of material and you stretch it further, it's going, you can look at this as glass half empty or half full approach. An I will always spray a little bit drier than an O, or an O will always spray a little bit wetter than an I. But it's where you can really dial the gun in when you buy it for your style and your technique. One thing I want to bring up is we came out, we introduced a tool with this gun that's a little like slide rule where it can help you make your selections. But what I really think is the most efficient way of doing it is we have the SATA nozzle finder app on both iOS and Android. You download that, and one of the easiest ways to figure out what option is right for me, you go in, you choose nozzle finder, and then for me, I like to go to what spray gun do I currently use. Most people, or most of us, this isn't going to be the first gun we're buying. We've been using something, regardless of brand, whether it's any of the big three that are out there. But as an example, I can go in and I can choose a SATA 3000 RP13. And I can even alter the conditions. Am I in Las Vegas where it's 110 in the booth and 5% humidity? Or am I in Houston where it's 110 in the booth but 100% humidity? You can adjust those things, and based on those attributes of your conditions and the spray gun that you like, it will tell you what option to go with the X5500. So it really takes a lot of that guesswork out. For the jobber reps that are watching this on that app, if you're in a shop and you're talking to a painter and going through that, as you scroll down to the bottom, there's a send this information by an email.
Very cool.
You can click that, you can copy the painter, you can send it to the store and say, hey, get Danyon over at ABC Auto Body, he wants this gun. And that way there's no confusion, there's no lost in translation of, oh, I thought you said an I, but no, you needed an O. You've gone through the app, you've taken the steps to figure out what's the right gun for you.
Awesome. So we're gonna, Casey's almost done with this thing, and you guys didn't get a chance to talk about paint suits yet, right? So what I want to do is Chris and I focused a lot earlier on process and color match and how these things work, and something that him and I agree on, and I think most tech reps would and most paint reps would, is we really have to focus on keeping that mixing room clean. And not only the mixing room, but also our toners, right? So there's a couple steps you can take to really make your life a lot easier. So we're gonna play a quick video. We actually mixed this color at Casey's paint shop yesterday. So we're gonna play a quick video, and we're gonna kind of talk about some of his methods, the way Onyx mixes, and then how you can help, give yourself a really good result as far as keeping your toners, nice and clean and perfect.
Terrific. Comfortable with a 130 to clear? You prefer a 1.2?
Onyx, like we had talked about, he's very familiar. He's been using this for about 4 or 5 years now. So what the first step that happens here is the hydro base goes in, and like we had talked about, this hydro base is what's converting this hybrid urethane into becoming an actual waterborne paint. So what I want you guys to notice here, if you don't take anything else away from today, notice what he does with his toners. And it doesn't matter what paint line you're spraying, everybody's got some form of a dosing lid. So as soon as he gets done pouring this toner, you're gonna see him take his paper towel and he's gonna clean this really good. And I can tell you that this isn't something that he's just doing for show. This is something he does all the time. And the reason this is so important is as these base coats dry on the lid and they get gummy or they get hard, a lot of times you can create an air gap. And if you create an air gap, like Chris and I had talked about earlier today, that can really set your toners off balance. So, you know, it's one of those things where it should be an SOP, it should be standard practice, that what we do is we mix these toners and we keep these toners really clean, and, you know, it'll make your life so much better if you do a great job maintaining all those. I'm going back. So we went through, you know, the mixing process, and what I really wanted to show with what he does specifically, and I've always trained my customers to do this. You get a lid and you mix a toner, goes back on the bank, back on the bank, back on the bank, and now you have this mountain stream of toner, right? And not only does it not look good, it makes the toner hard to open, but you're also going to breach some air in there. And there's a lot of paint lines out there that don't like air. None of them like air, some of them really hate it. So Chris, you know, from your perspective as a guy that was a trainer for a lot of years, you know, how important do you feel it is, regardless of paint line, that you keep these dosing lids as clean as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Cleanliness is next to godliness, right? And going in, it's not that hard to have a towel in your opposite hand, and as you pour, you just wipe it off before you put it back. Right, when we go into those shops and we're troubleshooting color match issues, you start just looking around and observing things, and it's always that. Like you said, it's got the solid waterfall off the front of the dosing lid. Then guys, they crack them over here offside because they know if they come and crack that lid up by the toner or by the can, some of those pieces are going to fall off into that can, throw off their mix, throw off the weight. So absolutely, cleanliness inside the mix room is critical.
So Casey, I think, do you want to come over here and kind of talk about what you just did, and maybe give the viewers a little bit of information, insight on your Onyx experience and how you feel about the product, how you use it?
Yeah, so at our shop, I mainly shoot everything in Onyx solvent. Today we're shooting Onyx water. A little bit of spray technique different between the two, but very close to the same. So it's not really that hard to pick up from one to the other if you use one and need to switch to the other for different colors or whatever reason. Today we normally would spray 2 coats and a drop coat. If you're watching, you saw me do a little sand. There's a couple spots I wasn't very particularly happy with. So in between the first and second coat, I did a little D-nib with some 800. Clean that up, put on 2 more coats and a drop coat. About to jump back in and do 2 coats of 5600 clear, and off to the races.
So, you know, you and I talk a lot when I'm out of the shop, and we talk about the way we started, and, you know, we can't talk about PPE enough. I mean, I just feel that we can't, and especially now, and, you know, the current environment and the way we have waterborne technology, and these clears are getting, you know, more vicious, and they're able to go faster. And so you and I grew up, and we all grew up pretty much wearing a charcoal respirator. So, you know, when you're at Casey's paint shop and you're doing a paint job, you know, what are some of the PPE things you go through to help keep yourself safe?
Mainly it's prep of everything. So not only the cars, but of myself. So I always wear gloves, always wear a paint suit, got my fresh air hood on at all times. It depends on how crazy I get with it. Sometimes I tape my cuffs up, and it really is about as clean as you can keep the environment that you're spraying in, the better job that you'll have on what the job you're doing, essentially. So every little step that you take just ensures the outcome, I guess, is what I'm looking for. So, you know, down to clean air, good air hoses, make sure your air hoses aren't breaking down, you know, fresh air, you're covered, make sure your booth is covered, make sure you're not, you know, got some guy on the outside of your booth spraying or sanding, and then you're pulling stuff in. So yeah, blowing stuff around, it really is like, it's all in the prep. And I don't want anybody to think I'm discrediting any painter by any means, but if it's not done correctly up to that point, it doesn't matter what you do or how good you paint, you'll never get the outcome you're looking for.
Yeah, you know, and you're exactly right. And a couple years back, you and I did some filming out there at the shop, and we were going basically through the entire RM process from, you know, beginning to end. And when you do things by the book, the results speak for themselves. And on that video, a couple people said, oh, you know, that's crazy. You don't have enough time to clean a panel like that. I have more time to clean a panel than I do to have a redo. And there's a reason they have multiple cleaners, and your solvent-borne cleaners like your 900 and, you know, your 902 for plastic and your 901 for fast, and then your 909, your 910, you know, for your water-based cleaner. because we have different contaminations. We have oil, we have water, and there's not one cleaner that's going to do a great job at all of them. So it's our job, you know, as technicians and guys that work on this side, to help guys like Casey to make sure that he can go in there and pull that trigger. He went through the process, and the problems are minimalized, you know, and that's the trick to it. The paint suit thing is something that I get calls on all the time. Customers call me, hey, I'm gonna get a new suit. What suit do you recommend? What are you looking for? So, you know, what you have these great SATA suits. What is the benefit and what are some of the nice things about the SATA suit compared to others?
Well, when this suit has evolved over the last few years, but what I like about it, our manufacturer that makes these for us and with us does a great job, because they add, as you'll notice in the front of this, it has the pinstriping like we talked about on the hood. And that pinstriping is carbon fiber that's sewn in so that it's anti-static. And by being anti-static, I'm not drawing overspray towards me as a painter. The other things that we do are things like the pocket. We made a large enough pocket on the front of this. We talked a lot earlier today about blueprinting and about documenting when you're making changes in the booth, you're doing spray out cards, etc. We even made a simple Sharpie holder on the pocket so you have a place to put that. If you're having to document blends that you're having to work on and maybe to apply for a supplement on an estimate that wasn't, you know, that we have to make a change to, the pocket's big enough to have a cell phone in if you have to, you know. So we tried to do that. It's got the pockets for the tack rags, everything else. But some of the more important parts of this suit, if I can have you hold that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the more important parts about this suit are even in the back. It's got this flexi back on all of our suits, whether it's our men's Pro Series or the ladies suit that we're going to show you, even down to our lower price, the white and gray suits. We put these flexi backs, so when you're bending over to work on a car or to tack something off or to scuff a panel, you're not tearing the seat out of your paint suit.
Right.
That's important. KC mentioned something about, you know, depending on how careful he wants to be, we use Velcroed cuffs so that once I have it on, I can pull that tight and seal it up tightly around my wrist so I'm not getting paint inside. The cuffs on the feet are nice because we leave a wide open cuff at the feet, and then you can Velcro them shut so that you can put the paint suit on, not have to take your boots off or your shoes off to put on your paint suit, and you get it back off. So there's so many things, plus the hood on this. The hood has a, you know, this thing will zip right up tight so that you don't have access if you're not wearing a full hood. And we've minimized the exposure that you have with this hood. So we're super excited about the way the paint suit feels. It's lightweight, but it gives us all the adequate protection that we need. So then we took all of that and we work a lot, you know, with a young lady on social media that everybody knows is Connie Mangiavinos with Girls Behind the Gun. And Connie talked to me, and a lot of people, she would talk to me saying, you know, the problem is for us girls in the paint business is that we're always using rolls and rolls of tape to make a paint suit fit, to fix the arms so that they weren't bulky, to fix the waist, to fix different things. And she said, we go through more tape in a year on paint suits than we do on cars. So we got talking with Connie, and we talked to our manufacturer that makes these for us up at Masport, and we came up with this cool design. And she actually went to several lady painters across the country and asked them all to pin their suits and things that they'd want changed. We took all that information and gave it to our manufacturer so they could make paint suits that actually fit ladies. So we now have this ladies edition Pro Series suit, so it has all the benefits that the men's do, plus it fits. And it fits them with it. So no more tape was the big marketing thing when we unveiled it at SEMA that year, as Connie said, no more tape, girls. And that really resonated. So they're great fitting suits, they look nice. The whole thing, again, it's got the flexi back, it has the Girls Behind the Gun logo on the back of the suit. It also has her Goddess Behind the Gun logo on the sleeve. So it's a cool looking suit, but it's functional. It absolutely was made to fit and to be used by lady painters. So we're excited about it. We're the only ones that have one.
Very cool. Yeah, so we talked earlier about, you know, when we were talking about color, 1 in 225 women are color deficient, 1 in 12 men. And it does feel so great that there are women getting into this and becoming painters. And not only are they doing it, they're excelling. You know, they're really doing well, and their social media presence is great. And, you know, it's a breath of fresh air to see that, because I think that everybody wins. So he's about done here. You're getting ready to clear, right, Casey? You getting ready to clear? So he's gonna put on an RM clear coat called DC 5600. It's a high solids production clear, air dries in 60 to 90 minutes depending on hardener selection. So as we tie this thing up here today, we're gonna come back tomorrow and do the QC, so we'll get it all finished up tonight. It'll probably be clean. He doesn't get dirt in his paint job, so no one's gonna have to buff it. And we'll see you guys tomorrow for the QC.